Good morning, folks. This is Greg Judy at Green Pastures Farm. Catching my breath after climbing that hill. Whew! I was cold, but I'm not cold anymore. Warm up. It's like them bulls are warming up coming up that hill. We just put all of our yearling bulls in with the bigger bulls, the 2-year-olds, and I think there's 6 machos in here. And it rained all day yesterday. I mean, it was pretty nasty. But you know what? That's the kind of rain we needed. And I wanted to cover that a little bit. So the idea of giving them just a little piece of stockpile here, and the reason I've got this little piece of stockpile is because we've been feeding just a little bit of hay, stretching it. So a few days there, when the ground was good and solid, we just basically we didn't move them. We just gave them a bale of hay, and it's gonna be, we're gonna get there's probably 10 or 12 days there in front of us that we're gonna still have for winter stockpile. But I wanted to show you something here. This dark spot right here with all these weeds in it, this is where the previous landowner would have fed a big bale, put a ring around it. It's a high spot. It's kind of secluded. It's got cedars on that side, it's got woods on that side, and it's got woods over there. And so I can see, he's trying to keep them out of the wind. And I'm guessing he fed several bales right here. And it's been quite a few years ago he did that. But it still hasn't recovered because the cows punched the sod out. So they compacted the soil. They went down, 8 to 10 inches with their hooves for days. I don't know how many days, but several. And they turned it into basically an anaerobic area where the soil is so compacted that all it grows now is weeds. It's got some grass. It's healing, and it will heal over time. Plant roots will heal an area. But where I'm going with that is unroll your hay. Don't feed it in a bale ring unless you want a whole bunch of these all the way around your farm. It's a good way to do it. Just put you some rings out there and start feeding them in this kind of weather, and you'll have these big old brown spots all over your farm, and you'll be growing a really good crop of weeds everywhere you did that. And if you want to grow weeds, go for it. But it's not a real good way of making a living. The animals are all looking pretty darn good. They're not complaining about having a nice break of Kentucky 31 infected fescue this morning. And it is it's March 14th. So we're about 30 weeks. We're 3 weeks away from some pretty darn good green grass. We can just hold out. We're gonna make it. I wanted to show you the first green that I've seen other than the grass, the trees. And here it is. That is autumn olive, the invasive species that takes over your farm. And these trees have done a real good job of that. Got a really nice lake over here, and you can't even walk around it. I mean, the only part you can walk on that pond is basically on the lake dam itself. It's a big pond, and So that's one of our projects. We call that a filler project. So we need, 3 or 4 hours. Me and my young men, when we need 3 or 4 hours to fill in, we'll come over here and just start on one side, and we're going to start working our way around that. And once we get them all cut, of course, we're painting the stumps so we don't have to do it again. And you won't get them 100%, not when they're that big. You're not going to get 100% of them killed, but you'll definitely put some pressure on them. And the ones that come back, you just have to stay on them. And within probably 3 to 5 years, you'll finally have your pond there where you can walk around it, enjoy it, and fish from the bank without, just being, it's just a brush pit around there. I mean, the autumn olives are actually out in the water, hanging into the water. That's how big they've gotten. So it's going to be a lot of work getting that done. We'll get it. It's just going to take some time. I wanted to show you over here as I was walking back up the hill a while ago. Show you how much rain we got. Well, there's one of our. I'll be getting that dude as soon as we get all this grazed off. Yeah, so there it is. Folks, I was just counting up. It's been 7 months since I've seen that. Water. Setting in the little pug marks that the bulls, it is wet. And you can see that bull there's probably 1,200. He's our biggest bull. That's the 3-year-old macho. And he just walked up through that stockpile, and see that? It's wet. But they were on this yesterday, and it rained all day long. And they did not tear it up. And it's on the side of a hill, which is really double disaster. With heavy cattle, you would never put them on a hill like this. If you did, it would look like a feedlot the next morning. I mean, it would just be all mud. But these smaller frame cattle, bulls, I don't know. People say, how do you graze all winter? Well, you got to have the right weight. You got to have the right weight animal. You can't have, 12 to 1,500 pound cows and expect to graze in a rainstorm and not tear your farm up. They're going to tear your farm up. That was one of the things I saw in Europe. The cattle over there are just monsters. There was one fellow, James Rebanks, in England, and he had the belted Galloway. They were the right size. I mean, those cows were probably 1,000. The really fat ones might have went 1,100, but he didn't have any 1,500 pound cows, and they were the right height. A lot of the cattle I saw there, you couldn't see over the top of their backs. They were, 5 foot tall at the shoulders, and they're like, well, what you're doing in Missouri might work, but it ain't gonna work over here. We got to put our cattle in a shed in the wintertime. Well, yeah, when you got a 2,000 pound cow, you better put it in a shed, because it's gonna absolutely plow your farm. Especially over there where they get a lot of rain. In the wintertime, it's just, I haven't been over there in the winter, but they say it rains, almost every other day. Yep, you're right. You're going to have trouble. Look what those bulls did to that cedar tree. I was looking over here, I'm like, I haven't been over here with loppers to lop that. The bulls lopped it with their head. They worked that puppy over. They like rubbing on them. They like breaking them off. That's why if you're going to plant trees out in your cattle pasture, you've got to put a fence around them, because they're not going to coexist with cows until they get big enough that they can take a good rubbing. That's one thing I do kind of like about the honey locusts. The ones that I do leave, which I won't be leaving any on this farm, but we are on Doug and Joanna's farm, and we call that the anti-itch tree. So the cattle have a high incentive not to rub on that. And when they don't rub on it, of course, they're not going to break it up and bust it off. Now, a whitetail buck, I learned don't trim the branches off of those until they get much bigger. If you trim the branches off, the ones that you leave, it makes a really good itching post for a buck. With his velvet on his horns, he'll take all the bark off your tree, and you might as well have cut the tree because now he killed it. They girdle them. They take all the bark off with their horns. But if you leave those limbs on there, they won't use them. They like a nice clean surface and run up and down with their horns. But yeah. One day closer, folks, to spring. But I was gonna show you over here. We got our work cut out for us on this pasture. I told Doug and Joanna, we'd take care of this brush and in the pastures. I mean, look at that over there. Those are all cedars. There must be 150 right there in that one area. They're all over that hillside. That's a sign of acidic ground. So that'd be a great place sometime in the future. Bring a couple bales over here and unroll it on that ridge. That's going to help it. But the autumn olives are just lousy in here. They're wanting to take it. They're wanting to take this part of the farm really bad. And of course, the mommies and the poppies are all around that pond down there. That's where their parents came from, and all these are babies out of those, spread by the birds. It's a big old, that's an eagle. I'll be darned. You don't see very many eagles. That was an eagle. The cranes are back, and this morning I heard my first red-winged blackbird of the year. The peepers, the frog peepers, we've been hearing them now for, probably a week ago or so. I heard my first peepers. That's a sign of spring. Yeah. Here's a neighbor up here. He's got a great big old Ford tractor, 4-wheel drive. He's got a bale on the front of it to feed his cows. Boy, when he starts that up today and runs that tractor out into his pasture, well, he's got a sacrifice lot over here. I mean, it's just mud, but he's gonna leave some ruts that'll be there for years. Versus our little bale unroller that we put on the back of that thing right there. And we don't leave any ruts at all. You can't even tell where we drove with it. So yeah. Gotta be smart, folks. Just because you've been doing things a certain way for many, many years doesn't mean that's the way to do it. And I'm gonna warn you, especially you men, the thing that gets in the way of people changing, especially men, is pride. Did y'all hear that? Pride. Pride will absolutely ruin you. Because you're so prideful that you won't admit that the way you're doing it might be a better way of doing it. Another way, you're not even going to change. You're just not going to do it. Because before you change, you got to admit that what you're doing may not be the best way of doing it. And that's hard for a man, especially, to change. They might go broke first before they change. So, humility, you got to be humble. Ranching and grazing and this whole grass regeneration thing, it will make you humble. It's going to smack you in the face a few times. But you know what? That's called experience. You get a callus from it. Maybe you might get a blister. Just keep on going. You'll find the right way to do it. You'll make mistakes, but you won't repeat those mistakes. But to go every year and never do anything different and then complain about not making any money in the cattle business, that's ridiculous. That's your fault. It's not the cow's fault. It's not the farm's fault. It's your fault. You just won't change. That's the way we did it, and that's the way we're going to do it. And I'm like, okay, fine. But change is a good thing. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here. There's a few cedar trees here just poking poking me pretty good. I can't stand it. I'm gonna get these right here on this ridge. It's a nice morning to do it, and I'm gonna get them. Folks, y'all have a great day, and hit that subscribe button on the way out if you would. And also, if you're looking for some cows for this coming grazing season, we've got them. We got some really nice 50% bred South Pole cows out of McAllen, Texas. So check out our website, greenpasturesfarm.net, if you're interested in some really good grass genetic bred cows to our South Pole bulls. Take care.